Happy to have you here. All right, everyone. I think let's start.
Okay. Good day, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see it. Thumbs up from the panelists so that I know that we can see it. Okay. Lovely. Good day, everyone that's joined us for this fascinating webinar. I'll share some general housekeeping tips before we get started. As we have English and Bahasa Indonesian speakers in attendance, you can access the interpretation support by clicking on the globe icon. The English option translates to English, and the Indonesian option translates to Bahasa Indonesia. You will also be able to hear original audio at a low volume, but you can choose to mute it from the same tab. To hear the interpreted language only, click Mute Original Audio. Okay, and if you have questions for the interpretation, please post them on the chat and we'll be happy to help. Okay, I am Daniel Padilla Ochoa. Friends and colleagues call me Danny. I am the Urban Ocean Project Director at Ocean Conservancy. I am an urbanist by training and environmental conservationist by trade. I'm based out of Jacksonville, Florida in the United States, and I have been working on the nexus of environmental protection and urbanism for the past 7 years, and today's webinar is very dear and near to my interest and daily work. As we go on, please introduce yourself in the chat, and if you have questions, use the Q&A window, and we'll be keeping track of the questions throughout the webinar. Today's webinar is in collaboration with GAIA, a global network and team that is leading the way in terms of advocating and providing strategies for communities around the globe to advance zero waste strategies and move away from incineration, waste energy facilities, and non-circular waste management approaches. Before we begin our webinar, I'll provide a quick overview of Urban Ocean, the program that I lead, which is a collaborative program working with cities around the world. Urban Ocean is a first of its kind initiative jointly implemented by Ocean Conservancy, the Resilient Cities Network, and the Circulate Initiative, which aims to achieve systemic transformation by working with leading cities and partners willing to invest in change at scale. Urban Ocean's challenge is to reduce the amount of plastic pollution that keeps growing and severely harms the marine environment, hampering our city's stormwater infrastructure and lowering our quality of life standards by compromising our water quality, our public health, and increasing greenhouse gas emissions. Urban Ocean, in a nutshell, is a capacity building and accelerator program. We enhance the understanding of the ocean plastics challenge in the cities that we work with by looking at the circular economy principles and assessing the waste management situation in those cities that we engage with. Ultimately, we support them to develop financiable strategies and projects designed to address the interrelated challenges they identify and increase participating cities' resilience. I'll give you an example. When we work, for example, with in Bangkok in Thailand, we leveraged a circular assessment protocol, a CAP, which is a study that looks at the gaps in the city. And then we identify what are the, not just the feasible steps to actually effectuate some change and begin that transition to circular solutions, but at the same time, look at how the city can support bigger scale and bigger change that moves them away from a very linear approach, like, for example, like we look in landfilling or waste energy incineration. The program itself provides a platform for the cities that participate to showcase their leadership and share their knowledge with other cities across Urban Ocean and the Resilient Cities Network and beyond. To date, we have partnered with 12 municipalities across 9 countries in Asia and Latin America. We have built a network of local partners that work with us and the respective municipal governments to reduce plastic pollution and change how their communities think about waste and create opportunities for those working to improve recycling and circular methods of managing materials after their intended life cycle. As you can imagine, a lot of our work touches upon the waste management sector. Depending on how it looks like, it could be the informal waste management sector, the formalized cooperatives, but that is very much an integral part of the work that we do. If you'd like to learn more about Urban Ocean, you can visit our websites and follow us on LinkedIn via the links and handles that I'll share in a short while. Okay, shifting gears to today's fascinating topic, waste to energy facilities. What are the true costs of waste to energy facilities? Some of the questions that we'll be exploring are, what should cities and communities consider when contemplating waste to energy incineration when it comes to addressing waste management challenges? What are some of the alternatives to incineration that are actually being tested today? What are some of those battles that communities have fought and now are on their way to test that we do have alternatives, they do work, and that we can actually scale them up? Today's webinar is hosted by the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. I'd like to invite my colleague Brex Arevalo from GAIA Asia Pacific to introduce himself, share more details about GAIA's work in waste energy incineration, and begin our first panel discussion on the true costs of waste to energy incineration. Brex?
Thanks very much, Danny. Let me just share my screen here. Slideshow. All right. Thanks again, Danny. And hello to everyone. Hello, all participants from wherever it is in the world that you are. Very happy to see everyone here. I'm Brex Arevalo from GAIA Asia Pacific, and I work as the Climate and Anti-Incineration Campaigner for the region. I'll just give a brief overview of the context of what we'll be talking about today, waste energy incineration, and a little bit of intro about GAIA. First of all, what is GAIA? GAIA is a global network of 1,000 grassroots groups across different continents and countries. This year we have hit 100 countries, so now we have members from 100 different countries around the world. We believe in a just and zero waste world. We envision one that is centered around respect for ecological limits, community rights, where burning and dumping are replaced with people-powered solutions. With our members, we work around policy, finance, influencing narrative shifts in order to enable these conditions for zero waste systems. In the Asia Pacific region, we have 120 member organizations. Now, a brief intro, a brief context giving about waste to energy incineration. A rough definition, and there could be many, is waste to energy incineration refers to different technologies for disposing of waste through high temperature processes, such as mass burn incineration, gasification, and pyrolysis. Some examples might include in the region are the Tuas 1 facility in Singapore on the left, and the newly established Nong Khaem, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Nong Khaem WTE plant in Bangkok in Thailand. Now, one important distinction to make here is that when we talk about waste to energy, we're referring specifically to this thermal process. It's technology-based. In contrast, there's also waste to energy that is organic-based. But for purposes of our discussion, we're talking about this one, thermal waste to energy incineration, or WTE for short. Another example of this is in Maishima in Osaka in Japan. WTE is well known in Japan for having 1,028 facilities as of 2021. Some of them might look like Disneyland over here, but beneath the facade of it is a more serious waste facility. Back in the day, about 20 years ago, there were about 1,900 in Japan. But because of increased regulations around the chemicals used and the toxics involved in the waste energy process, this has been lowered to 1,028 today. In other countries in Asia Pacific, you have these numbers. These are the ones under proposal or either under construction today. At least 79 in Thailand, that's at least one per state. 17 in Indonesia, 19 in Malaysia, again, at least one per state. In the Philippines, despite a longstanding ban on incineration, we're seeing at least 29 new facilities in the coming years. In Vietnam, there's 16. Globally, we're seeing around 2,700 by 2028 globally. In Asia Pacific, this is projected to boost by about 200 facilities. What is influencing this WTE expansion across the region and globally? Now, one of the important things to consider is the influence of international finance, such as climate finance, development finance, and other forms of finance to developing countries that we're seeing today. The CPI, the Climate Policy Initiative, in 2023 estimated that WTE projects account for 94% of all climate finance for methane abatement and solid waste for the years 2021 and 2022. This is roughly around $4 billion, $4 billion US dollars globally, if my math is correct. Part of this is the influence of international financial institutions or multilateral development banks like the ADB or the Asian Development Bank. One of the contexts of why we're having this webinar is that next week, the Asia Clean Energy Forum is happening in the ADB headquarters in Manila, where a lot of this will be talked about. Waste energy incineration, but also other energy-related matters for the region. WTE incineration is supported by these institutions through different means. It could be through funding, could be through giving a technical assistance, providing feasibility studies, or even site visits. This has influences on policies such as national sustainable finance taxonomies, ones that financial institutions at the national level follow. Examples of ADB programs that are related to this are the Energy Transition Mechanism, the ETM, and also just energy transition partnerships that are happening in different countries. This also has an effect on related technologies, such as refuse-derived fuel or RDF, and also biomass co-incineration. That ends the context setting, and we will now move on to our first panel, Implications of WTE for Cities. Our first panelist, who will be talking about health implications, is Dr. Jorge Emanuel. He is an adjunct professor of environmental science and engineering at Silliman University and the former chief technical advisor for Global Environment Facility Projects, or GEF, at the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP. Following Dr. Jorge is Donnie Julius Christian, a researcher at WALHI who will be talking about governance implications for waste energy. Followed by Donnie is Chaitanyan Devika Kulasekaran, Senior Research Associate at Center for Financial Accountability in India. Rounding off our discussion for the panel 1 discussion is Maria Victoria Tenefrancha, President of Zero Waste Baguio in the Philippines. Dr. Jorge, floor is yours. Dr. Jorge, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me now? First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers that put together this webinar on an important issue. My topic deals specifically with the health implications of waste to energy. Let me yeah. All right. So the first point I'd like to make is that waste to energy plants release a host of pollutants harmful to human health. Listed here are a few examples with their health effects, such as ultrafine particles, toxic metals like mercury and lead, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons linked to cancers and kidney and liver disorders. Many of these are released not just into the air, but also in the wastewater and ash. A case in point is dioxins. Dioxins are widely recognized as the most toxic chemical pollutant known to science. Dioxins is a term used to describe a family of 210 chemicals, of which 17 are extremely toxic, and for this reason, I will focus on dioxins. When dioxins are emitted from the stack or chimney of a waste-to-energy incinerator, they are carried by the air for many kilometers. Gradually, they fall to the ground onto soil, plants, and bodies of water, where they undergo a process called bioaccumulation. This means that the dioxins increase in concentration as they move up the food chain. For example, if the dioxin levels in a lake is 1 part per trillion, 1 ppt, the dioxin concentration in the tissues of fish might be 128,000 times higher, depending on the type of fish. Because of bioaccumulation, the way dioxins get into our bodies is mostly through food. As dioxins are released from incinerators and spread into the local environment, chickens, cows, pigs, and fish bioconcentrate the dioxins from their surroundings, and we end up ingesting the dioxins when we eat the eggs, meat, seafood, and dairy, such as milk and cheese. How are dioxins from incinerators tested? The old way, still used in many countries, is periodic testing by taking samples of the exhaust gas from the stack for 6 to 9 hours under steady-state conditions using the equipment shown on the left, and then analyzing the samples in a lab. Periodic testing is usually done once or twice a year at a cost of several thousand US dollars per test, but they greatly underestimate dioxin emissions. Today, there's a new method called continuous dioxin monitoring. For almost 2 decades now, we have had clear evidence that periodic testing does not capture episodes of high dioxin emissions as much as 1,000 times higher during transient conditions, such as during startup, shutdown, or when heterogeneous waste is fed into the incinerator, compared to when the incinerator is operating at steady state, which is when periodic tests are done. The graph shows results of continuous dioxin monitoring of waste-to-energy incinerator for a whole year. The red dashed line at the bottom shows the typical dioxin limit. The peaks show that the dioxin limit was exceeded 96 days out of the year, high emission levels that would likely not have been caught by 1 or 2 tests a year for only 6 to 9 hours. A side-by-side comparison found that periodic testing twice a year, as done in many countries, underestimates dioxin emissions by 460 to 1,290 times. This is why even when periodic stack testing shows that an incinerator meets the dioxin limits, one still finds elevated levels of dioxins in the surrounding environment. An even newer method for testing of dioxins is biomonitoring. This method is based on bioaccumulation, as I described earlier. Since free-range chickens bioconcentrate dioxins from the environment into their eggs, instead of measuring dioxins from the samples of the gas from the chimney, samples of eggs from backyard chickens in the area surrounding the incinerator can also be used to determine the results of incinerator emissions. Now, some have argued that modern incinerators no longer release much dioxins, but biomonitoring of state-of-the-art incinerators, as well as, of course, continuous dioxin monitoring, tells a different story. Take, for example, a modern waste-to-energy incinerator in Belgium. Tests of eggs from backyard chickens around the incinerator, after only 2 years of operation, found that all egg samples as far away as 7 kilometers exceeded the European Union's dioxin limit, with half the eggs showing very high dioxin levels. The picture on the right is the Ivry-Tres incinerator in Paris, the largest waste-to-energy incinerator in Europe. It drew international attention in November 2023, when headlines reported that French health authorities warned millions of residents not to eat the eggs from local farms, not only in Paris, but also in 410 surrounding municipalities, as shown by the brown shade on the map. That's because 83% of eggs were found to exceed the European Union's safe limit for dioxin and other pollutants. Now, why would health officials be so concerned that they would warn people not to eat local eggs? Let us look at the health effects of dioxins. Dioxins have been known to cause cancer since 1997. Among the cancers linked to dioxins are soft tissue sarcoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a type of leukemia, cancers of the respiratory tract, and prostate cancer. Dioxin is also an endocrine disruptor, and exposures of pregnant mothers and young children to dioxins have been linked to low sperm count or abnormal development of testicle in males, as well as decreased fertility, ovarian dysfunction, and endometriosis in females. Dioxins are also linked to birth defects, such as spina bifida, shown in the photos, as well as miscarriages and negative impacts on children's development. So far, I have only spoken about the health effects of dioxins from waste-to-energy incinerators. But as I pointed out in my first slide, waste-to-energy incinerators release many other pollutants. These include toxic metals, acidic gases, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, toxic ash, etc. I don't have time to go through each of these, but I want to talk about one more type of pollutant called particulate matter, especially PM 2.5, which is often not even measured in periodic testing. What is particulate matter, or PM? These are particles released by incinerators and suspended in the air. We're especially concerned with the very small or fine particulate matter, which, like dioxins, cannot be seen by the naked eye. If the left circle represents the diameter of human hair, and the right circle represents the smallest size of visible smoke, the particulate matter we are concerned with are even smaller. These are the relative sizes of particulate matter 10, or PM10, and particulate matter 2.5, or PM2.5. The numbers refer to their sizes in microns, or millionth of a meter. I mention particulate matter because of a fairly recent technological breakthrough. Today, there are small, lightweight, portable devices costing a few $100s each, which, when worn around the neck by people, can measure PM10 and PM2.5 very accurately. Some of us in this panel have been involved in testing these new devices, including my colleagues with WALI in Indonesia and colleagues in Nigeria. I will describe the results for Dumaguete, Philippines. 17 volunteers from communities living or working around an incinerator in Dumaguete wore these devices during the day for 9 days each. We then compared what they were breathing with the World Health Organization's guidelines for PM2.5. The WHO guideline says that daily averages should not exceed 15 micrograms per meter cube as much as possible, but if it does, persons should not be exposed to above 15 micrograms per meter cube for more than 4 days in a year. The number to remember is 15. These are typical examples of the results for 2 different volunteers on 2 different days. The graphs show the concentrations of PM2.5 at different times of the day. Remember that the average should not exceed 15. That's that red line representing the WHO guidelines of 15 micrograms per meter cube. Here are the overall results. All 17 volunteers exceeded the WHO limit of 15, with average daily concentrations ranging from 17 to 106, as shown in the left table. Remember that the WHO guideline says the average should not be exceeded for more than 4 days in a whole year. The right table shows that 88% of the volunteers already exceeded the WHO limit of more than 4 days out of the 9 days that we asked them to monitor the air, with 8 volunteers exceeding the WHO limit for all 9 days that they were monitoring. So what are the health effects of long-term exposure to PM2.5? Acute bronchitis, asthma attacks, hospitalization due to difficulty breathing. For pregnant women, there is a risk that their babies will be born with low birth weight. For people with heart diseases, it means more premature deaths. So far, I have described the health effects of dioxins and PM2.5 only, but what are the health effects on communities exposed to all the other pollutants, including dioxins and PM2.5 from incinerators? Many studies have been done worldwide of incinerator workers and people living around incinerators. I summarize a few studies here. For example, incinerator workers are found to have high levels of dioxins, mercury, other chemicals in their bodies, and lower sperm count for the male workers. For people living around incinerators, one finds higher cases of different types of cancers, including liver and colorectal cancers, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, soft tissue sarcoma, and leukemia. Note that the high cancer risks are found up to 5 kilometers away from the incinerator. There's also increased risks of miscarriages found among residents up to 4 kilometers away. There are higher risks of birth defects up to 2 kilometers away from the incinerator. In general, the closer to the incinerator you live, the higher the risks. In summary, waste-to-energy incinerators release toxic pollutants to the air, wastewater, and ash, including releases of extremely toxic dioxins, which are linked to various cancers, reproductive disorders, birth defects, and miscarriages. Waste-to-energy incinerators also release PM2.5, which is linked to asthma attacks, premature deaths from heart diseases, and lung cancer. Studies of residents around incinerators find significantly higher risks of these and other health impacts up to 5 kilometers away. The health implications of waste-to-energy incineration must be a vital consideration for cities and municipalities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jorge, for laying out to us the different health implications of waste-to-energy incineration and highlighting the new study from Dumaguete on air quality monitoring, including with your partners in Indonesia and in Nigeria. We will move on to our next speaker, coming from India. Please welcome Chaitanyan Kulasekaran from the Center for Financial Accountability.
Thank you, Bex. Thanks to GAIA for this opportunity. My screen is visible, Bex. I'm going to share 2 stories with all of you today. The first story is about an elephant. So there is this village where the people have not seen an elephant, and there is a competition, going on around. So the participants' eyes have been tied, and they are asked to describe about the elephant. So we have 3 participants for this competition. One participant touches the tail of the elephant and says that the elephant looks like a rope. The other participant touches the stomach of the elephant and says, no, it looks like a big wall. And then the third participant, fights both of them and says, no, it looks like a snake. And once these people have finished describing about the elephant, their eyes are opened. The rope is, the cloth covering their eyes is removed. And they are shocked to see that the elephant is very different from what they had imagined to be. So our own experience is rarely the whole truth. In the second story, we have this elephant replaced by a waste to energy plant. And we have this, this man, from a waste to energy company, explaining about the benefits of the waste to energy plant. So he says waste to energy gives free electricity. But the truth is that up to 50% of the cost to establish a waste to energy plant is often given by the government. They get subsidized water, they get subsidized land, tax exemptions, they get a lot of carbon credits, and now for burning plastics, they also get something called as plastic credits. If you look at this news item, I'm sure this is the case with most of the other countries as well. Waste to energy today is the costliest form of electricity. The cost to establish a 1 megawatt waste to energy plant is about 33 crore rupees. This amount is like 5 times higher than the cost of establishing a solar power plant, 3.5 times costlier than a wind power plant, and twice as costly as a nuclear power plant. We all know nuclear is very toxic, but this plant is even more costlier than the nuclear power plant. And the electricity that they produce is bought at 7 rupees per unit, which is again the costliest form of electricity. And I would like to explain this picture, the numbers that you see on the screen. So this is the amount of money that the Chennai Corporation will pay to the waste to energy incinerator operator in case they decide to go ahead with the plant. This translates to roughly 2,000 Indian rupees every single day for 1 ton of waste. So this is the amount of money that the corporation has to spend to run a waste to energy plant, and it is far from being free. The next argument that the industry tries to make is that it gets rid of all your waste. Sounds very interesting. But survey after survey in each of our countries in the global south has shown that roughly 60 to 70% of the composition of the municipal solid waste is wet waste. Our food waste, our vegetable waste, our fruit waste is not going to burn. So if you look at the rules of operating a waste to energy plant, they allow up to 20% of auxiliary fuel. This means you can use diesel, coal, and other fossil fuels to burn your garbage because the wet waste simply won't burn. And this is the composition of the waste that they are going to burn. So this is from a tender document for a waste to energy plant in India. So this clearly shows that 17% of what goes inside a waste to energy plant is going to be plastics. And then we have 2% of PET bottles and then 5% of paper. 2% of PET bottles might look like a small number, but 2% of 2,100 tons of garbage is 42 tons of PET bottles. That's more than 3 crore PET bottles being burnt in this waste to energy plant every single day. So this PET bottle should have not been produced in the first place. And the worst thing that can happen to a PET bottle is at least being recycled. But in a waste to energy plant, it's just going to be burnt. And this is the data from the quantity of plastics that were burnt in the 4 waste to energy plants in Delhi, India. So if you look at the numbers, in the year 2021-2022, they burned roughly 735,000 tons of plastics. What is frightening from this figure is that this is just 1/3 of their capacity. These plants can process 3 times more. They can burn 3 times more plastic in their incinerators. And we all know that Delhi breathes the worst air in the entire world. And despite having the poor AQI, burning of plastics is going to have impacts on the health environment apart from the economic impacts that they will have. And this is what comes out of a waste to energy plant. Roughly 40% of what goes inside a waste to energy plant comes back as toxic fly ash and bottom ash. And if you look at the tender documents, these plants are allowed to reject 15% of the waste that comes inside their premises. So roughly 55% of waste is going to anyway end up in a landfill. But to manage this toxic waste, to manage this hazardous waste, we need what is called as a secured landfill, which is going to be very expensive and it is going to impact the economy very badly. So by burning all these things, by burning all the recyclables, the impact on the livelihoods of the waste pickers, the waste management ecosystem is going to be heavily impacted. And when all the other arguments are exhausted, we get this argument that waste to energy is latest, modern, and state of the art. But this is the truth. The first waste to energy plant was built 1.5 centuries back in the United Kingdom. Their original name was Destructors. They started changing names. Now they call it what? Carbon capture, whatever. But the original and the real name of a waste to energy plant is Destructors. It destroys human health, it destroys livelihoods, it destroys the environment, and it destroys the economy. The EU is very clear. It is moving away from the waste to energy plants. It is not funding these plants anymore. Waste to energy plants are excluded from the Just Transition Fund, from the Circular Economy Fund, and major banks are not funding these plants. Look at the US. No new incinerators have been built in a new place since 1995. It's been 30 years since the US built a new plant. And what is the US doing? It is shutting down these plants. California, you all might know, is a very, very developed state, produces a lot of waste. They have shut down their waste to energy plant for economic reasons, for climate reasons, for environmental reasons. So what is a waste to energy at the end of the day? It is a technology which is discarded by the global north. It is a technology which is kicked out by the global north, and it is a technology which is thrown away by the global north. Coming to India, most of the waste to energy plants in India have failed. When I say most of the plants have failed, I am not saying that a few plants have succeeded. What I am saying is that none of the plants in India, all the parameters are monitored. We heard Dr. George talking about how harmful dioxins and furans are, how continuous monitoring shows that 1,000 times more dioxins and furans are emitted by these plants compared to periodic testing. But let me tell you, Delhi being the worst city in terms of air quality, in the year 2020, the government checked the emissions from these plants and found that the dioxins and furans levels were 800 to 900% more than the prescribed norms. This happened in 2020. For the next 4 years, they did not test dioxins and furans. Parameters such as hydrogen chloride that is emitted from these plants are not tested. So the truth is that none of the waste to energy plants in India, all the parameters stipulated under the solid waste management rules are being monitored. So what exactly is a waste to energy plant? It is this. It is a white elephant. In the first story, we saw about an elephant, and in the second story, we are seeing about a white elephant. So the story goes that during old days, when the king wanted to punish someone, the king would gift them a white elephant. Because white elephants are very expensive to maintain, the one who possesses a white elephant could become a pauper. That's the story. So this is what is being tried to, this is what is being tried to be pushed on us. The white elephants, the waste to energy plants. Waste to energy plants are not the silver bullets for our garbage. They are white elephants which are being thrown away from the global north countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chaitanya, and the amazing story, bringing everything back with the image of the elephant. We will move on to our next speaker, Donnie Julius Christian from Walhi in Indonesia. And before that, just a quick reminder for our participants that you may type in any questions in the chat or in the in the Q&A portion of your Zoom, if you like. In a few minutes, we will also have an open forum where you may also raise your questions there. I'll hand it over now to Donnie. Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Brex. So hello everyone. Again, my name is Doni and I'll be representing Walhi in this discussion. So what I'll present will be cases specific in Indonesia and mainly regarding governance. So just set up the context first. There are actually 17 from Brex's presentation, but from our regulation, it commissioned 12, and the 4 prominent ones are in Java, and this will be the one that we are talking about. So making it quick, all the data that I provide here mainly focus on the composition and also the capex, the tipping fee, and also the capacity. Why? Because it will all relates with the governance. In general, government of Indonesia champions the WTE as the silver bullet to the waste crisis in the whole country, actually. While in fact, that in Java, 80% of the waste is organic waste, plastic, and paper. So that's already an interesting overview on how the government see waste against the solution that they offer. And these facilities that are being built are being held accountable to the local government. So all the costs, and mainly the tipping fee, are being liaised to the local government, and it will be binding for at least 20 years. So that's the whole nuance of what WTE construction in Indonesia. So the first one is the waste composition, more than 80% dominated by organic and also plastic and paper. And then the cost of construction is more or less more than 100,000 US dollar per tons. And then the tipping fee are liaised to the local government with the contract ranging at least 20 years, up to 30 years. Moving on, picking up a bit from the financial conversation that Chetanyan just discussed. So these are the three things that constrict the government, Indonesia, the local government in Indonesia when it comes to waste to energy. So the high level line is the WTE is a budget sucker for a very long time because of the three things: the amount of years, which is more than 20 years, the high amount of budget that is demanded, and also the limited fund that the government have. So as I've mentioned, the local government owns the responsibility to pay the tipping fee, yet they do not have the capacity. I'll use the case of Jakarta, where interestingly, Jakarta has the highest proportion of budget for waste management and also has the highest financial capacity compared to other provinces in Indonesia. Yet, from just one WTE that is being built, which only have the capacity of a quarter of the total waste generated in Jakarta, it takes 40% of the budget for municipal solid waste. So it's a very ineffective solution and then a very constraining. It means that the other 60% budget has to be used to serve the 3/4 of the rest and also other activities such as collection, education, sortation, and stuffs. So this paints a picture about the financial governance for Indonesia, where it becomes very complicated when WTE is being implemented towards the local government. And actually, having this high budget commitment and also high time commitment is the first layer. There's a second layer to it. And the way I put it, it's like marrying the wrong partner, because picking the thermal waste to energy is like marrying a possessive gold digger that you don't actually want. Now, I've mentioned that there are 80% of organic waste and also paper and plastic. What does that mean? It means that more than 80% can be managed by other solutions. For example, composting. For example, recirculating the remaining foods. And then another example is waste banks. Those are the efforts that can be made with all the budget that will be or has been spent on the WTE. So on the second line is your life stuck with it because you commit all of your resources to the WTE. And worst part that it's not even the one that you need. So I see that as the the worst, the nightmare of the governance when it comes to WTE. In Indonesia's context, the opportunity means that the situation means that the real solutions become disappear, because now the contract demands the waste to be prioritized to the WTE first. And since I've mentioned that the budget are already sucked up for the WTE, it means that even if the government can do something else, they do not have the financial means. So they cannot do anything. They are binded by the contract, binded by the financial capacity. So I see that this is the worst part of the governance when it comes to WTE, which is the second layer after the poor financial governance. But WTE also goes above and beyond. It does not only strike the finance side, it does not only strike the idealism of waste governance, but it also strikes the people and the environment. As I've mentioned before, there are bad implications to public health when it comes to WTE, and in Indonesia, it also has been observed. I've mentioned here 5 things when it comes to the people and the environment, and mainly because poor enforcement, not well-regulated space, and also mobs interest. So contextualizing on Indonesia, we do not have a strong regulation when it comes to monitoring WTE. We have, but it is not enforced and it's very relaxed. So it comes to the point number 4 when it comes to the public health. Respiratory diseases has been detected to be rising in Surakarta in one of the sites since the commissioning of the facility. And then we go up from the first one is that on the governance when it comes to preparing the facility, there's a very poor amount of communication, which makes people do not know what they are facing and then what are the consequences that they will face. The situation later creates a rejection, creates a resistance from the people. And this is the case in Bandung, where for almost 2 decades, since the facility is being planned to be built, up until now, not even a single groundbreaking happening. That is what's happening in Bandung, because the company that is entrusted to build it, doing the land acquisition phase through illegal and also unethical means. And then the third one, we are also talking about the just transition. So in the case of Surakarta, the waste pickers in the landfill site, they are getting rid of, excluded from the site because the land is now being privatized. It is a brownfield WTE, by the way. And eventually, they now have to rely on other things. But they already did some kind of advocacy and they eventually win. But there was some time where they cannot access their livelihood. And then the last one, it also creates another impact towards the rivers and also the sea, which is the case in Surabaya. Because also, just same one like the fourth one, there is no enforcement when it comes to the waste, the residue generated from it. So all in all, from the governance side, WTE strikes not only the finance side, but also strike the social and also the environmental part. What I can conclude is that, at least from Indonesia's point of view, from the cases that we have, pairing the word WTE with solution is not the right way to do it, because it's undermining the definition of solution. Since WTE at the end of the day only offers more problem rather than trying to solve something. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donnie, for explaining the context there in Indonesia. I was quite surprised to hear that 40% of the budget for municipal solid waste in Jakarta goes only to 25% of the waste. We will move on to our final speaker for the first panel. Everyone, please welcome Ms. Maria Victoria Tenefrancia, or Ms. Becky, President of Zero Waste Baguio. The floor is yours. Excuse me, Ms. Becky, I think you're on mute.
Again, okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, allow me to share with you a story of sweet victory brought about by citizen-led initiatives. July 31, 2024 marked a turning point in Baguio City's environmental journey, a historic and hard-fought victory for sustainability advocates, as the city government officially scrapped plans to build a controversial waste-to-energy incineration facility in the neighboring agricultural town of Sablan. To put things into perspective, one must understand Baguio's unique position within the BLIS region, a coalition of 6 local government units in the province of Benguet. Of these, Baguio stands as the only highly urbanized city, home to over 400,000 residents and swelling to nearly 1 million during peak tourist and academic seasons. With its small land area of 57.41 square kilometers, the city produces an average of 592 tons of waste daily, yet has no space for a proper sanitary landfill. As early as 2015, the city officials of Baguio eyed incineration and waste-to-energy technologies as potential solutions to this mounting crisis. But parallel to that vision, a quiet revolution was taking root. Zero Waste Baguio, a volunteer-driven environmental NGO, began spreading a radically different message, one of prevention, reduction, and community-driven waste solutions. From schools to villages or barangays, from media outlets to City Hall itself, we championed the zero waste philosophy, urging citizens to see waste not as a problem to burn, but as a challenge to rethink and redesign. Yet the road was far from smooth. The rising popularity of online deliveries and the city's ever-growing population continued to push daily waste up from 470 grams per capita in 2015 to 490 grams per capita in 2022. This resurgence in consumption reignited debates within the city leadership, with some arguing that incineration was the only viable path forward. Next slide, please. Sablan, a quiet agricultural municipality just 18 kilometers from Baguio City, became the unlikely epicenter of a heated environmental battle in 2024. Home to just over 11,500 residents, many of whom are indigenous peoples whose livelihoods depend on farming, Sablan was identified as the proposed site for a waste-to-energy incineration facility. But the stakes were higher than they first appeared. The targeted location wasn't just farmland. It was part of a critical watershed, a tributary that also supplies water to the nearby municipalities of Burgos and Naguilian. Next slide, please. The moment the plans came to light, Zero Waste Baguio mobilized with urgency. Volunteers reached out directly to Sablan's indigenous community, local officials, and health workers. We organized a grassroots forum where we, together with speakers from Eco Waste Coalition and Healthcare Without Harm, laid out the harsh realities of waste-to-energy incineration, its potential toll on health, agriculture, and the environment. This was not just a technical issue. For Sablan's people, it was about protecting their way of life, their water, and their ancestral land. Then came the pivotal moment. On July 31, 2024, Zero Waste Baguio hosted a landmark forum featuring Dr. Jorge Emanuel, a trusted environmental scientist and expert on the dangers of waste incineration. The audience was a powerful cross-section of society: barangay or village officials, health workers, educators, students, indigenous representatives, national agencies, and media figures. Even Baguio City's mayor, despite a prior engagement, chose to stay and listen. Dr. Emanuel's presentation held everyone's attention. He spoke with clarity and compassion, basing his message on science, while addressing real-life consequences on people's lives. He carefully explained the problems with incineration, not just the environmental damage, but also the economic waste and the health dangers it poses, both now and in the future. As he spoke, the room grew tense with urgency and determination. And then history was made. Right after the discussion of Dr. Emmanuel, the mayor stood before the crowd and delivered a bold and unexpected announcement. Baguio City would officially abandon its plans for the waste-to-energy facility in Sablan.
And after looking at all this empirical data that you presented, I would like to officially declare that the city of Baguio will be formally abandoning its waste-to-energy project.
The applause was not just for a policy decision. It was a celebration of science, people power, and the triumph of sustainable thinking. This was more than a win for Sablan or even Baguio. It was a beacon of hope and a model of environmental democracy for communities across the Philippines. Zero Waste Baguio and its partners and supporters cherished the moment. After years of tireless advocacy, community education, and public pressure, the tides have finally turned. This wasn't just a policy shift, it was a declaration of values that clean air, community participation, and sustainable development take precedence over short term fixes. And for the citizens of Baguio, it was proof that persistence, people power, and a shared vision for a greener future can prevail. Moving forward, Baguio City is now emerging as a national leader in circular economy practices, transforming waste into economic resources to promote environmental sustainability. Backed by the United Nations Development Program and supported by both public and private sectors, the city has shifted from waste to energy to a waste to resource approach, already reducing daily waste that has no more value and ends in the landfills or elsewhere. Through a partnership with the European Union's Green Economy Program, Baguio will be implementing circular economy initiatives across barangays or villages and in the tourism and education sectors. Broader community involvement is encouraged to make circular economy a shared and lasting movement. The events of July 31, 2024 mark not just the end of a misguided proposal, but the beginning of a transformative path forward. In standing with the people of Sablan, Baguio City affirmed that real progress does not come from burning waste out of sight, but from building systems rooted in equity, sustainability, and community wisdom. It is a clear message that development must not come at the cost of indigenous rights, public health, or ecological integrity. Today, Baguio is not only turning away from incineration, it is turning toward innovation. By embracing the circular economy, the city is proving that systemic, community-led solutions can thrive even under the weight of complex urban challenges. By advocating for the 10 Rs, the city keeps products and materials in circulation for as long as possible, minimizing waste and maximizing resource use. These 10 Rs are refuse, rethink, reduce, reuse, repair, refurbish, remanufacture, repurpose, recycle, and recover. The shift is not easy and much work lies ahead. But what happened on that day in July showed that with science, solidarity, and the courage to listen, cities and municipalities can choose a different future, one where environmental justice and sustainable development can go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Becky, for sharing the story of Baguio, where last July the plans for the WTE facility was abandoned in the open forum. Thank you for highlighting the involvement of the community in that. And with that, we will now move on to our open forum for the next 10 to 15 minutes. And in this section, we have already compiled, massed some questions over there in the chat box. But if anyone would like to, I wonder if is the floor open for speakers, comms team, if people would like to raise questions.
Yes, we can accommodate them.
Okay.
Brex, you're on mute.
Thank you. I think maybe to kick things off, we have a very interesting question from the chat box from, unfortunately, an anonymous attendee. And the anonymous attendee asks, are all waste-to-energy initiatives harmful? How about biomass plants that are burning on empty fruit bunch? Is agricultural waste from palm oil and also replacing coal-fired plants with wood pellets in some of the mix? Are these harmful as well? Dr. Jorge, thank you for typing in some of the answers in the chat box, but I think for the benefit of our wider audience, would it be all right if you voice out your response? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I was pointing out that Brex mentioned at the beginning that the topic was focusing primarily on the high heat thermal waste to energy technologies. But there are, as he also mentioned, biological forms of waste to energy. A good example would be biodigestion or biogas digestion. Some of my own experiments at the university have looked at biodigestion of domestic waste and sugarcane waste, because I live in a province with a lot of sugarcane. And this is being used to produce biogas, which then can be used as a cooking fuel or for heating. And the residue from it is used for fertilizers. So that's an example of a cleaner form of energy that doesn't use burning or high heat. On the other hand, the burning of agricultural waste is also still a major source of pollutants. When I review the dioxin inventories of different countries, the burning of agricultural waste, although not as high as, say, municipal waste or medical waste, is still a contributor to dioxins, release of dioxins in the environment, although much less. But it also releases a lot of other problematic pollutants, as with incineration. In particular, for example, particulate matter, as you can see from all the heavy smoke in the burning of biomass and so on. So they're not as bad as municipal solid waste incinerators, but they are still major sources of pollutants. And so anyway, so I guess I'll just end there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jorge. Now we have more questions in the chat box, but if would anyone like to raise a question, to voice it out? Perhaps you may raise your hand. Yes, maybe we can go to Ruth.
Hi, my name is Ruth and I'm from Zero Waste Sabah. So usually the answer that I get when I tell ministers that WTE is not the answer, so they will ask me back, what then is the answer to solving the waste that is already generated and piling up at the landfill? So do you have an answer for this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I think some of this might be answered in our second panel on alternatives to waste-to-energy incineration. But if anyone in this first panel would like to respond?
Next, I would like to take the one on Singapore.
Yes, Chair.
Thanks. With respect to Singapore, there is a recent study which I can share about the heat emissions per unit of electricity that is generated compared to other types of incineration. Other types of electricity generation is very high, when the WTE is in Singapore. And also there are issues with the handling of bottom ash generated from these WTE plants. Brex, I remember the study you shared about how it is impacting the biodiversity in an island where it is being dumped. So that is a link, a study which I can share, type out in the chat box for Siddharth.
Thank you, Chaithan. And I think what you were referring to was the offshore landfill that Singapore relies on. So basically, in that landfill, that's where all the ash is dumped. Now, just to be clear, Ruth, apologies if we cannot answer your question in this panel. We'll raise it again in the second panel where we'll talk about alternatives, if that's okay. So much.
Okay, Brett, thank you.
Next, we have Angeli.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm Anjali from India. I work at an NGO called Sahas, which works in the space of solid waste management. So generally what we see in India is that we have MRFs, DWCCs, etc., collecting the dry waste, and the non-recyclables like MLPs or plastics that have very low value are sent to cement factories for co-processing in the kilns. So is it similar to the WTE plants? Are these harmful as WTE plants?
Thank you for the question, Angeli. Dr. Jorge, I saw that you were already typing a response in the chat. Would you like to take this?
Yes. So I was in the middle of typing another response. One of the problems with the use of cement plants, cement kilns, is that these technologies, especially the air pollution control systems in these technologies, have been optimized specifically for making cement. And so they're good at removing, for example, particulate matter, but they're not good at removing other things, especially when you're burning municipal solid waste. And that's one of the problems. The other problem is that the regulations typically for cement plants is far less stringent than with waste to energy incinerators. So it allows the industry to get rid of some waste, rid in quotation marks, while getting away with releasing more pollutants that they normally would not in the case of incinerator plants. So those are some of the problems with cement kilns. I should mention people are arguing that because cement kilns operate at much higher temperatures, they don't produce dioxins and some of the other problems. So I constantly have to remind people that dioxins and furans are produced not at the high temperature section, but when the gas begins to cool down. So it's that becomes the big concern. So to me, the use of cement plants is very problematic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jorge. Thank you, Angeli. Now, we will continue answering the rest of the questions in the chat box. At this point, I would like to hand it over back to Danny, who will facilitate the second panel on alternatives to waste to energy. And before handing it over, just one last round of thank you again to our first panelists. Thank you very much, Dr. Jorge, Ms. Becky, Chaithan, and Donnie. Danny, over to you.
Thank you, Brex. Thank you, everyone in the first panel. I definitely learned a lot, and I have so many questions that I'm hoping that we can also summarize in the wrap up as we go into alternatives. So thank you again. Moving into our second panel, let me share my screen. should be a little small. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Okay, is that better? Okay, lovely. So I will going to introduce our next panel. Going from what we've just learned and really building on top of what are the true costs behind waste to energy incineration, the next possible step that we really, when we're devising this entire webinar, is how do we share what alternatives exist, right? And then in addition to that, what are some of the lessons learned in terms of, for example, in Baguio City, where we have an aversion towards a possible future, right? We were able to skirt that and move towards a circular economy and a circular mode of functioning that really is intersectional, that is collaborative, but also at the same time, what happens after municipalities and communities have made the decision to not only construct, use, operate, and then deconstruct, right? What happens after communities move beyond waste to energy incineration? And then what do we do with the most problematic waste streams? What do we do with the biggest amount of it? So with that, the order that we will hear from our speakers is the following. So first, we will hear from Yam, or Salisa Trapipitsiriwat, who is from the Environmental Justice Foundation. Salisa will share about their work on the implementing upstream solutions to plastic waste, which is one of the most troublesome waste streams that we have because of its production, extraction, logistics, and use costs, but also after the consumption and disposal. After Yam, we'll hear from Shivo Nair from GAIA Asia Pacific, who will talk about the biggest share of that waste composition, which is our organic waste. So what do we do with organic waste that is better than burning or burying it? After Shivu, we will hear from Akira Sakano, who is from Zero Waste Japan, and they will share about what happens in cities that are moving past the incineration. So what does that path after incineration look like? And what are some of the lessons learned and some of the challenges that lie ahead? I will now pass it over to Yam. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. I will just share my screen. So hi everyone, thank you for having me. I am Salisa, or you can call me Yam. I am a senior campaigner and also oversee the plastics project with the Environmental Justice Foundation, or you can call us EJF in short. So today I am going to talk about a project that we have here in Thailand called Bottle Free Seas that we implemented last year in not last year, 2023. And we're working with the Bangkok government to implement a refuel initiative. So this is, what I'm going to go through today. What is bottle free seas? Why do we need to reduce, reuse, refill, and how to also replicate, and also some lessons learned and recommendations from the Bottle Free Seas project. First, what is Bottle Free Seas? So this is a project that that came about in 2023. We reached out to the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration, and hereafter I'm going to call them BMA. So they govern Bangkok, and to pilot a plastic reduction initiative. And first, it's just a pilot project. And I think most cities, especially in the global south or in the Southeast Asian region, when it comes to waste management and we talk about it, it's always talking about the downstream aspect of it. And also when it comes to the legal, that gives power to our authorities. It also only gives them the power to manage waste from the downstream perspective as well. So this has to be pilot because there's no legal instrument that is actually supporting this. So we reached out to BMA. We proposed that, hey, let's install 10 water refill stations in public spaces in Bangkok. And also let's create a map of existing the water stations that we already have. And let's use that to promote reduce, reuse, and refill concepts into, possibly in the future for the policies of Bangkok and hopefully the wider Thailand to end plastic pollution. So as I said, there's no actually legal instrument supporting the upstream measures of waste management yet in Thailand. So when we first approached BMA, we tried to find policies that most aligned with what we want to do. So we found this, that BMA is committed to provide clean and accessible drinking water for people as one of their top policies. So we said that, okay, instead of just, which is very important, water is, human rights for everyone. If we do this, we also get to reduce plastic as well. So that's where we find a policy possibility, and then we reached out to BMA and convince them to agreeing on working with us. So this is, I think, probably the first lessons learned that I just want to share, that sometimes I know that in some cities, environmental come first, but in most cities, it's the other aspect. So we have to just write on the back of other policies as well. Sometimes it's a good start anyway. And this is apart from installing the 10 water stations in public areas, and also in collaboration with shopping malls, cultural centers, parks in Bangkok. We also think that 10 is a very small number. So, but there are reuse and refill is not something new. It's water stations, you refilling water is very normal. It's already exists in our society. So why don't we map those, the ones that we think, clean enough, and the owners are willing for the public to go and share with their water, and put it on the map. You can scan here if you want to see how the map looks like. And right now we have more than 200 water refill spots on there. So next time when you come to Bangkok, you know where to refill your water. And just a little bit on why do we choose this path? Just to have to mention that EJF in Thailand has a different projects. We also have a recycling projects where we work with fishing communities to recycle fishing gear. But we definitely would like to explore, solutions that are more upstream. So this is what we do, and which is a good thing. We have a comparison between, recycling downstream solution and upstream solution, how the projects are different. So I think the first thing that I would say, why implement reduce, refill, reuse, repair, anything R that is before recycle, is first of all, it's very affordable. So one refill stations can cost from $1.7 to $6,000. That depends on you, how creative you are. So as you can see here, this is me visiting one small island in Thailand, and I found this refill station available because it's just a big bottle of water, putting a dispenser, and they sell half a liter 3 baht and 1 liter 7 baht, which is cheaper than bottled water. So that's the incentive you get when you refill. So this so just you just have to be creative with it. It depends on your budget. The goals matters, and it also decreases waste disposal budgets as well, because there's no plastic going into landfill. Another thing is that you don't need to get your hands dirty. Unlike the recycling project, which we are very proud of, we can see that the implementation is very different. For the water refill stations, each time you refill, that's when you reduce your waste already. But if for the downstream waste management initiatives, you will have to get your hands dirty, unfortunately. And it's also very highly impactful because with the 10 stations that we have, and we're so afraid that it's too little and it's not going to make any impact, it turns out that within 2 years, we have reduced already more than 2 million single-use bottles from these 10 stations. And right now it is operating on a rate of 10,000 bottles reduced per month per station. So it all goes back to how creative you are, how you are communicating your water refill stations, how you're promoting reuse and refill? Are you saying it's a new thing, it's something difficult, and it's something that people need to change their habit? Or you're just saying that refill, you have done it for 1,000 years. It's with us all along. It's very easy. It's also affordable. And the maintaining of one station that EJF used, which looks like this, like the one you see at the airport. This one costs only around 1,000 USD per year to maintain, plus water, plus electricity, plus whatever you need, and filters. Yeah. Okay. It doesn't move. There you go. And on how to replicate it, I don't want to be cheeky, but I think first thing is to talk about, how you think about reduce and reuse, refill, repair, and these REs. First of all, if you think it is difficult, then it is difficult. But if you think that, it's always been with us, then it has always been with us. And when it comes to refill, reuse, reduce, it doesn't have to just be water stations. It can be so many things. Like, this is something I took from the market the other day. This is already a refill practice. If you bring your own cups, then you refilled. If they provide reusable cups, then that's reuse. And at the end of the day, you reduce your waste footprint. And also, I think be creative with it, because sometimes I understand there's no policies. How do we get, a political engagement from our government? Find the closest one, as I said. Maybe there's a way. If there's no funding, work with the existing practices that we already have. If there's no champion, not easy, but maybe try to become the champion, or ask someone to become the champion, because sometimes it needs no funding at all to start a refill or reuse project. But for cities, any city representatives here, if you're interested in starting your own bottle-free seas or refill initiatives in your city, EJF, we have produced a report that talks about what bottle-free seas is, and a very detailed a guide, step by step, how you can implement a similar initiative in your city. It starts from like how to locate the best location. How do you make it universally accessible? Even for wheelchairers, we need to talk about people with disabilities. How do they get involved in this? Because it's all environmental justice. We have a checklist where you can, go through the checklist and see how you can implement a similar initiative in your region. And you can also scan there to get access to the report. And after working with BMA for 2 years, this is the commitment that BMA has made out of the initiatives that starting from just 10 water stations that we work with them. Right now, they're committed and already installed 200 more public water refill stations in their entities, using their own budget. And they're also looking into expanding it to 5,000 spots in Bangkok, used through, own investments or the public and private mechanism. So that's Photo Freezies. And if you have any questions, do let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yam. I have many questions. I hope that we can talk about the communications. I hope we could talk about what are the benefits that BMA has seen. It's really interesting to hear that they're exceeding their goals. Thank you again. Okay, now we'll turn over to Shibu Nair, again from GAIA Asia Pacific, who will talk about organic waste and what are some of the approaches there. Shibu?
Yeah, thank you. Let me just share my screen. Thank you. I think, hope you can see my screen.
We can.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all. And yeah, I'm Shibu. I work as campaigner on organics and climate at GAIA Asia Pacific, and I'm based in India. So let us just look at what the municipal solid waste looks in Asia. Globally, it is 44% of municipal solid waste is organics. And when it comes to Asia Pacific region, except a couple of countries like Australia, Singapore, New Zealand, the rest of the, or even Hong Kong, the rest of the countries have a domination. You can see a kind of a domination of organics in the municipal solid waste. And generally, like if you go by statistics, it is 54 to 56% of kind of a municipal solid waste is organics. That said, like in some communities, like in some of the South Asian countries, it can go up to even up to 70%, depending upon the kind of economy they have. So that means like 80, and we all know that 80% of organics is actually water. It is moisture. And if you take the total municipal solid waste, it is around 40% of the mixed municipal solid waste is water by weight. And on an average, in any centralized waste management systems, we transport waste, we collect, there is an energy spent on collection of waste and then transportation. That the distance is between 15 to 45 kilometers. That again varies from country to country. Anyway, they transport far away from the city into some other place to manage their waste. So again, we are burning fossil fuel, and remember that like what you are transporting is more like most of it is actually moisture and organics, which have other uses. So this is the kind of a reality which in which we are living. And I just wanted to like thanks for Chaitanya to pointing out into the Indian scenario. The other side of waste to energy is like the most of the waste ends up in landfills. That's mostly in when you say landfill, it need not be the sanitary landfill. It could be like mostly it is unmanaged landfills in Asian specific. And again, you need energy to dry this waste, mixed waste into make it burnable to if you want to burn it. And in some places, it is composted before burning it, and you just compost and then dry it and then burn it. And what you see in the picture is the bigger one is the waste landfill, the landfill site in Delhi. And the other two pictures are, it is actually an unusual picture. This is supposed to be the waste to energy ash. It's ash from waste to energy plant, and you can see the cloths in it. Either the Indians must be using cloths which are not flammable, or the waste to energy plant is not at all operating at the set temperature that is supposed to be the safe for generation in terms of what you call dioxins and furan. So this is to just show that what theory is not at all aligning with what is happening in the ground. And to give further information is that the bottom ash is transported 15 kilometers away from the main plant and is being used to reclaim a water body into a kind of a residence area. And there is no precautions, no safety features, nothing. And people are, you can see those people are scavenging for melt plastics or melt metals or something, whatever they can carry out. So this is the other side of what you call waste to energy projects, which are proposed as a kind of a complete solution with limited, like you don't need larger land area for managing waste. And unlike in composting, like that is one of the major concern for all the governments. Like you need lot of lands to do composting or to do any other operation, but waste to energy actually reduces the use of land. But what happens is that, yes, the plant is using only limited space, but the post process is actually polluting, contaminating the entire region. So that is what is the reality, at least from the Asian experience. A kind of a recent assessment by CCAC shows that like the methane emissions from like the anthropogenic methane can be reduced by 45%, which could actually bring down global warming potential at minimum 0.3 degree Celsius. So this is one of the signs which we know. And we also know that like there is a methane matters, that's a report by GAIA. That's a kind of an assessment of methane from waste sector. And waste prevention, source separation of organic and managing or recovering organics and getting it back to soil for composting or as a kind of a manure, adding soil carbon. That can actually, we can actually reduce methane emission from waste sector by 95% if we follow those minimum steps of source segregation and segregated management of organics. So it's a kind of an opportunity. And if you look at the food waste scenario, this is again very stark reality. That's 1/3 of the food produced are wasted, and that is causing 8 to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. So we all know that methane, this is 20% of methane emissions are from waste sector, and it is 80 times more powerful as carbon dioxide. So we know all those sciences. And we also know that composting is a climate game changer where you can actually absorb. When you come back to the statistics, the numbers in Asia specific region, like minimum 50% of your municipal solid waste stream is organic. And if you can source segregate it and compost it, you can actually reduce methane emission. And you can prevent organics going into landfills or even dump sites. So source separated collection and treatment of organics can reduce methane emissions from landfills by 62%. And this is a kind of a large number. And zero waste is an approach. It is not that a kind of a perfect scenario if there is no waste, but we see zero waste is a kind of a goal. And it is an approach in it's like ethical, efficient, and economic resources. It is not just about just at the end of the pipe solution. It is all about better resource use for future. So this is the kind of a concept with which the zero waste programs are happening in Asia Pacific. And thanks to the kind of campaigners and the grassroots level organizations across the globe who were continuously championing the idea of zero waste. And now this is slowly getting in a kind of a mainstream. If you look at the strategy for zero waste is waste minimization, where you just work around food loss and food waste reduction. Green protocol, where you minimize the use of single-use products that is being practiced in many communities across the region. Segregation, source segregation, and segregated collection. That is also very important. You do segregation, source segregation, and if you are transporting it in together, then there is no point in that source segregation. But segregated collection is also another point. Decentralized resource recovery, which actually eliminates the need of transportation, the heavy transportation, and ensuring environmental justice and just transition for the people for the people who are around, like especially the waste pickers, the people in the informal sector, the waste workers, they need to be addressed. And accountability and producer responsibility on the corporation, the corporate's part. So I just want to just give you a kind of a not the kind of a very fancy what you call the perfect scenario. Again, this is about a kind of an initiative from different parts of the Asian region. I would start with my own place, that Kerala, where I live. It's a state in India with 30 million population. And it tried everything, the centralized waste management, and they were also proposing for waste to energy. But slowly but surely, they were trying to do decentralized source level management of waste with an approach of zero waste. And recently, in last March, the government was, in a way, technically, they could declare more than 90% of its local governments. Like we have around 1,000 plus local governments in the state, covering around 30 million population, and that is being covered. They are now, this is one state where source segregation is mandatory, and they are encouraging people to do source level composting or biogas, for which government is providing subsidy, financial incentive, plus government is only picking up whatever things which do not have a kind of a market value, commercial value for recycling, and whatever have a recycle value is being collected by the informal sector. So this is a kind of an emerging model. And similarly, even before Kerala, like in Pune, in India, this is one of the big city with more than 4 million population, where they have integrated waste pickers for door-to-door service on waste collection, segregated collection, and operation of cluster level composting facilities, where they recover organics. So they prevent organics getting into larger dump sites. So again, this is, you just look at it's covering around 90% of the total waste issue. Similar thing is also happening in Mumbai, parts of Mumbai and parts of Bengaluru city, where waste pickers are integrated and they run dry waste collection centers and composting facilities. In Mumbai, even women groups are running biogas plants where they collect organic waste and convert that into biogas, and it is being used for energy. So there are models in India, and just coming back to again to Kerala, these are some of the models which is being widely promoted at the household level, where density of population is very high and you cannot afford to have much space. Even the cities also find it difficult to identify space for waste management process. So now the common facilities, especially the cluster level facilities, are located on the public roadsides, especially roadsides or near the bus stops or near the government office complexes. So wherever they have space, they have come up with modular systems where you can, like, people who can afford to have a facility at home, good. And even if you have a facility at home, but you have an excess waste, you can bring it to the cluster level composting facilities. And there are segregated collection of organic waste in terms of, for example, all the meat waste are collected from the shops directly, and it is going to the rendering plants. Again, from the food waste from the hotels and restaurants are collected, and it is going for the pig farms as a kind of a feed. And from the market, the vegetable waste in a large quantities are collected, and it is being channelized for the farmers to be used as manure. So there are many business models. These are the business models where private parties are playing around. And there are government models where government is providing subsidy to the citizens to encourage composting at source and providing different kind of technologies. There are choices where people can make and they can go for it. And more than that, there is a kind of a forward linkage of organics, like it is again connecting that compost to food. And these garden you see are not on the ground. Unfortunately, we don't have enough land. So people are like the government is encouraging people to utilize their terraces, whatever space they have, like even in a bag, a small plastic bag, you can cultivate your vegetable. And this is being again supported. The technical support is also available for that. So that actually encourage people to do more composting, like they convert their food waste into compost at source so that they can produce better food. So that is actually generating more livelihood and more resources for people. It is not just in India, it is not just in Kerala, it is happening across. There are many cities, for example, in the Philippines, like we just heard from Baguio, where they fought waste to energy and they are moving into the direction of resource recovery. So if you look at the term of resource recovery or material recovery facility, that actually originates from the Philippines. I think long back they have started this campaign. So San Fernando, Fort Bonifacio, Malabon, Baguio, all these, the number of cities are increasing in these places where they have separated, like a segregated collection of organic waste and community level composting and converting that back into food. So that is happening in many places in the Philippines. Japan, Kamikatsu, a small village in Japan, is actually championing the segregation, the kind of segregation and practicing zero waste systems. South Korea have come up with a kind of a model on food waste reduction. Basically, they are just looking at and they are succeeding. It is not that they have completely done it, but they are in that right direction to bring down the food waste and organics going into landfills. Malaysia, similarly, Malaysia is a place where they have that experience and expertise of composting. They are also slowly but surely they are also promoting even urban level composting, community level composting, so that capturing organics back to soil. So that is the kind of an idea is driving all these places. In Bandung, Indonesia, similarly, Indonesia also, it's not just in Bandung, in many places of Indonesia, they are practicing it. So the composting is also taking place. So the thing is that organics, the prime component of the municipal solid waste, need to be captured and need to be recycled back into soil to ensure that nutrient circulation. So that is a major thing. And this is also a kind of a climate action. We need to understand that this is a climate action. And that is the thing which actually our government has to give that importance to. So it is not just about a scavenging job. It is all about maintaining that nutrient cycle in the nature, as well as it's a climate action to prevent methane from organics or methane from the waste going into the atmosphere. And so recently there is a kind of a movement of because these are all local actions. These are all local governments do the action because they are the people who are implementing these projects. And we have just facilitated as local governments methane pledge. So far, 50 plus cities and city leaders have committed to bring down or to establish systems to ensure segregated waste collection and capturing or recovering of organics from municipal solid waste to prevent organics ending up in landfills, and to ensure environmental justice principles throughout their solid waste management program. And we are like getting more and more cities joining in this movement. And I think we also like call out for, we encourage you to just popularize this idea, and people can join this global movement by clicking on this link where they can just fill up their information. The cities can fill up their information, and where GAIA will be providing additional technical support through our members and information or even the guidelines, things like that, so that we can encourage people to go for zero waste systems, which is basically decentralized and source segregation. Segregated collection is mandatory, and which recognizes informal workers, the waste pickers, as well as the waste pickers and waste workers, the informal sector workers are the part of this the entire process. And this is what we are doing currently. And I just leave it here for for more questions. But if you refer back to our site, there are many reading materials, case studies of different models where organics are being managed well. And there are some handbooks are also available for developing organics management system in your own neighborhood. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Shibu. Thank you. And can I ask for a favor? Could you post the link that was in your second to last slide on the chat while we get going for the next speaker? Thank you, Shibu. Our next speaker is Akira Sakano. She is from Zero Waste Japan, and Sakira will share about what happens in cities that are moving past incineration. And so what does that path post-incineration look like? Akira?
Yes, thank you very much. And then I already think that the Shibu already gave a good introduction of my background, which is kamikatsu. So I was the one who was leading the transition also for the town called Kamikatsu here in Japan, which was declared as the first zero waste town in Japan. So today, I don't have any presentation materials, but to kind of, bring you back the kind of context and then statement of what's happening in Japan, what's been the history, and then why, it's kind of challenging here in Japan, so that you don't go through the same path as we are, now going through. So that's the biggest take, I believe, that I can, bring forward for here. So Japan, as Brex already stated in the very beginning, has the land with the most incinerators, sadly. Before stating this is the shame, but I'd like to kind of explain why this is happening as a history. So as you can imagine that, Japan has gone through the biggest boom in the population growth and the economic growth in the past years, much prior to the history of the rest of the Asian countries, I believe. And then within that procedure, Japan had to deal with massive waste production, as you can imagine. Then what was happening is that Japan, with the limited land, since we are the islands country, similar to some of you, we didn't have enough land to landfill. So what actually happened during that time is that, we actually had to find a space, of course, to landfill. But since without enough land left for the landfill site, we started landfilling the ocean. So right now, our biggest landfill nearby the Tokyo is the Tokyo Bay Area, as you can imagine. But also, of course, we cannot continuously always continue landfilling or ocean filling. So that's why we actually had to decrease the amount of waste going to the landfill. So that was the reason the national government decided to, take incinerators so that we can reduce the amount going to the landfill. So that was the direction implemented back in 90s. So all the municipalities were directed to implement incinerators in the first place. And then during my elementary school years, we still had very small scale incinerator, for example, at schools as well. So after, Japan is quite famous for, all the kids clean their own classrooms by themselves after the schools. So after, for example, I myself clean the classrooms at the school, the students are the one who actually brought the cleaned, waste bin, and then to the small incinerator in the backyard of the school. And then we were the one, burning the waste directly at the small scale incinerators that time. But then the dioxins and other toxic matters issues came out. So that's why the government banned the small-scale incinerators to make sure that emission of dioxins and other harmful matters to come out from the incinerators. So that's why all the existing incinerators here in Japan is huge, as you could see from the previous pictures. Then that is to, of course, filter all these particles coming out from the incinerator, as well as to make sure that the temperature is high enough that we don't emit dioxins anymore. So to mention the current status of incinerators here in Japan, while there are so many, at least they do not emit dioxins at this point. But also I have to mention that while no more dioxins, but other potential issues, including, for example, the heavy metals coming out from the particles emitted from the incinerator would still remain. And then we are also, calling out for the better regulation to make sure that such, various criteria to be added for the monitoring of the incinerator emission as well. But while such issues remains, still considering the decline of the entire population of Japan, still we are big, but still we are declining with aging population. The number of incinerators is expected to decline as well. Meanwhile, at the local level, municipalities is still getting challenged because once you implement the incinerator, it's basically fixed minimum of 30 years. So this is the key takeaway I want to highlight for everyone. Once it's implemented, it's 30 years fixed plan. So it's really difficult right now from the zero waste, advocate or initiators perspective here in Japan, that once it's fixed system and then all the waste management system is based on burning waste as a system, setup, it's really difficult to transition. So Japan is well known for the cleanness of the country, maybe, or we are quite good at sorting waste at a very clean level, at the source separation level. But the challenge is, even though the citizens are committed to sorting certain resources, it's really difficult to shift the biggest system, which is designed to burn our waste as the first point. Yeah, so that's the things that we want to highlight. At the same time, several things to add. Also, I'd like everyone to learn from our failure of PDF. Also, Brex pointed out in the first slide that, the RDF plant. This is the kind of, it was used to be said that it's a kind of miracle plant that you can turn any kind of waste into fuel that you can utilize afterwards. But the RDF plant is already considered as entire failure here in Japan, knowing that the mixture of waste, of course, make it very challenging to make any standard of the fuel level. And then right now, also some municipality who implemented that RDF plant back in almost 20 years ago, now struggling to continuously running for that facility, while reinvestment for renewal of any of the resource circulation or even incinerator plant costs too high, so that they are continuously paying for the maintenance fee of the RDF plant, and that's a quite burden for anything. So just to mention that. Well, good news side is that finally there are few municipalities with the longer planning of over, let's say, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years plan. They started to stop and close the existing incinerators after, it's already 20 years old or 30 years old. So one good case practice is the city of Kamakura, which is located in the wider Tokyo metropolitan area, which is about 170,000 as a population. It's quite a big city. And then back in 2019, they declared that they have confirmed the plan to close all the incinerators within the city. And then the last incinerator who existed just actually got closed this year, March. So they are fully done with the incinerator in their cities. So right now what they are doing is to collaborate and partner with nearby cities who has the bigger incinerator. But the current direction is to consolidate at least the number of the incinerators into the, to cover the wider scope of the cities, so that at least the number is declining. So Kamakura is now committed to that too. At the same time, they have compared the cost and they have committed to the reduction of the waste, because after you don't own your own incinerator as a city, you need to pay as you throw. I mean, you need to pay as you bring your waste to the other's incinerator plant anyway. So that's a good incentives for the cities or municipalities to reduce their waste production itself. And then right now, also, as I mentioned, with the decline of the population, all the Japanese government is consolidating and coordinating municipal cities to cities dialogues. And then they are trying to build the incinerator or rebuild the incinerator together, so that, as I said, it's at least committed to decline the numbers. And within that direction, they always need to kind of compete to each other. So that they can commit, okay, I should pay less rather than the other cities by reducing our waste. So that's a kind of good incentives for them to reduce the waste. Just the last comment. So with knowing the previous dialogue, that even also in Japan, about 30% of household waste are organic. And then that all now goes to incinerators, and that's really a huge amount. And then we really need to cut down that so that we can actually reduce the waste going to the incineration as well. At the same time, push for the resource circulation for the organic resources. We just launched 2 years ago the platform to divert the organic waste going to incineration. So it's a group of grassroots organization who has been advocating and implementing composting at the household level, also at the community level in the different regions in Japan. And then we are collecting data, we are pitching to the local government. At the same time, with all the data collection, we are now pitching to the national government how we can shift that organic waste going to the incineration. So that's other things I'd like to share in the network. And then if you are on the same stage, or if you are tackling towards that, we'd love to share. But thank you very much for now. And then I'm really happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akita. Okay, we are a little short on time, but I want to invite all of our panelists for the second group to come on video. And then Robbie's going to help us by pinning all our videos together. And then we'll take some questions. And I'm going to look through the list to see if there are any that are kind of coming up as these, let's say like a group of it. While we get that sorted, what I wanted to start with is looking at how, regardless of whether a city is committed to alternatives to incineration or is working through contentious plans of incineration, it seems like waste separation is a necessity, either because it's pay for tonnage, it's because even in incineration itself, it's more efficient if they are separating the waste. And so even in that worst case scenario, that is also a part of the calculation. And then of course, as we look at circular economies and circular waste management, waste separation is a necessity to figure out what the waste materials and compensations are. And so I'm curious to kind of hear from everyone on how waste separation is showing up in your work, and how do you see that from your particular angles of organic waste, upstream solutions, plastics, and then really working within a society that's still very much committed to working with incinerators.
Yeah, okay, I can go first. Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. So as maybe I posted on the chat, the case study of Kamikatsu. So this town is the most famous one, famous for its very detailed segregation categories, which once was 45. Now it's actually consolidated into 43, but it's still the top number, I believe. And then that was happening only because, well, in the smaller rural town, we didn't have option to do the incinerator anymore without the budget, without the land, and then etc. But once we committed to the, do the sorting, recycling, especially partnering with the recyclers, knowing that our population is very small, once we separate the waste, the per category waste output will be very limited, right? So for the recyclers to make sure that they cooperate or partner with us so that they come to rural area and collect not that many amount of the waste, then we really needed to dedicate ourselves into proper sorting, qualified sorting, and then something better for them after they collect. So for example, all the papers are tied up only with the paper strings instead of plastics, or like, for example, like hard paper tubes. For example, the core of the aluminum foils, maybe. This is too hard for the paper recycling company to put it together in the melting pot in the first. So that's why they wanted to separate that in the beginning. So we decided, okay, one category for hardcore paper tubes. So that's how we increased the number of the segregation. But that's one example. And then what's interesting here in Japan that probably in the English terminology for waste management, there's the term called source separation, but we don't have that term in Japanese because source separation itself is too common. It's already part of our daily life that everything needs to be sorted at the source. I mean, we already have that mindset. So how do we actually make sure that this is happening at like next level is our challenge. But at the same time, knowing that, whoever produce needs to take responsibility in terms of the sorting is in our core of the culture, at least. So that's why now my challenge itself is that how we can expand that to, for example, organic waste, or like how we can, accelerate that
It's
to the
fascinating
different
to
level.
hear of the high levels of separation and segregation. And I also, if you have any information, Akira, on kind of what would it take, one, like what is the compliance rates of households, right, of separating their waste, and then we mentioned what will it take to go beyond that, right? So in the community level, what are some of the details there? If you have any of those details that you can share in the chat, please do. I'm keeping an eye on the time. Shibu and Yam, please share for about a minute each, and then we'll move on to Brex so that he can close the session.
Thank you. Yeah, the thing is, like, it's just opposite to Japan, and especially when it comes to India or any other South Asian countries, where segregation is a kind of a task, the mindset of people, because this is government's job they have to do. So what one thing which in where I live in Kerala, the state that followed was that instead of asking people to segregate waste, we asked people do not mix. And there was a calendar-based collection system. So that calendar-based that like we will pick all your non-recyclable plastic wrappers and carry bags on every Tuesday. So we didn't say that you have to segregate plastic waste, but we said we only pick that. And we don't pick your organic waste daily. So you have to have your own composting facility. Government will provide you subsidy to set up your own composting facility, or you have to give it in once in 2 days or things like that. So for every material, like there is a kind of a calendar. So the calendar, it's a kind of a very strategic way of telling people, instead of say asking them addition for people asking segregation, like asking them to segregate, this is an additional job. But here we said, do not segregate. We will pick only these materials on these days. And in some materials are once in a month. So you have to keep it at home for a month. For example, electronic waste or even the footwear, bags, things like that. So this is now picking it up very fast, and that is actually helping us in utilizing the whatever little space we have, and with the limited resources, the recycling rate is right now high. Like it is now the segregated collection mechanism reaches up to, I think, more than 90% of households across 8 million households. So that is, you can imagine about that kind of a, so that is possible. Now it is now spreading out other places as well.
And I wonder how, and this is for a future conversation, but I wonder for these like scattered and very separated kind of schedules for different materials, how that leads into the private sector filling in some of that like kind of pickup schedule. Yam, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll turn it over to Brex to finish the session.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think I have 3 points to answer. The first one is that, when we talk about waste separation, it's always targeting households and citizens to, do it. But at the end of the day, the products that are available on the shelf are, we have to admit that they're not very easy to separate. And the design for recycling, design for reduction, and the standards, and, to make it very easy for people to separate. I think that needs to be legalized, and that needs to be more talked about. It has to be extended to the producer responsibility as well. And then, the households will be able to follow. I think the second one, comes with the lack of legality, especially, in Thailand, we don't have any legal support when it comes to waste separation. So, everything is still voluntary. There's also no dialogue that talks about what should be the priority when it comes to waste management. We all know about waste hierarchy, but countries like Thailand, for example, will still receiving grants, from countries. It's a matter of also international relations. Sometimes we're receiving WTE just because it's grant that we get from foreign support. So there's lack of, prioritization dialogue, talking using information science, and talking about how do we go about international relations when it comes to someone bringing in money for us, are we saying no? And yeah, so I think these are the 3 points that I just want to raise answering your question.
I absolutely love that last point. Thank you so much, Yam, Shibu, Akira. Thank you so much for participating in the panel. Brex, over to you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Danny, Akira, Yam, and Shibu. So at this point, we will close the webinar. And just a few reminders before we leave. First is that we'll be sending copies of the presentations along with a number of different source materials by email shortly after this webinar. I've also shared via the chat box over here a couple of things. The first is calls for support and action from communities and organizations from different countries around waste to energy. We have a community in Rawang that is petitioning for more response time and more participation regarding environmental impact assessments in their area. In Australia, there's a call for a moratorium on waste to energy. Of course, we also have the city's methane pledge is shared by Shibu. And given that the Asia Clean Energy Forum is happening next week, we encourage everyone to participate as you can. There's in-person and online participation. And throughout the process, we hope that we can generate greater inclusion, greater participation from communities and from civil society organizations that are not usually able to participate in these spaces. We also have a list of different references and materials over there that you may check out. Some of these are big reports that tackle a lot of the issues discussed in this webinar. Some of them are, the reference materials to the presentations given by the speakers. At this point, I think that is all. And I would just like to thank everyone again, everyone who are participating from cities around the world, from different organizations and communities. We hope that this webinar has been helpful for you in assessing whether a waste-to-energy plant does make sense for your city, for your municipality, for your community. And we hope that to continue the discussion on zero waste solutions and on different alternatives to waste-to-energy that, as the speakers have discussed, turn out to be cleaner, safer for communities, and also cheaper. With that, thank you again to all of our speakers, to Ocean Conservancy. Thank you, Danny. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brex.
Thank you.